Hi, everyone, and welcome. As people are joining us from the waiting room and you're all saying hello in the chat room, it's great to have you for first time. Kathy and Leslie, welcome. Therese, wonderful to have you back. We do have several more people signed up, but we may go ahead and get started in just a couple more minutes. Don't like to wait too much longer after 4 or 5 after. So we'll give it just a second and then get started. Thank you so much for your patience. Those of you that are just now joining us from the waiting room, please feel free to find the chat box at the top or bottom of your screen. We'd love to hear where you're from. If this is your first time or if you've been before to one of these speaker series, we're thrilled to have you. So welcome. We're going to get started in just another minute. Okay, well, with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. You'll note the program is already being recorded. So we ask that everyone remain on mute throughout the duration of the recording. That will help maintain the integrity of the audio for when we post it to our YouTube channel for sharing long term. So welcome everyone to the August installation of our Friends of Malheur speaker series, Celebrating Malheur. This is part of our ongoing effort to celebrate 25 years of conservation stewardship for the Malheur Refuge in Eastern Oregon. So we've been doing these programs since January. We had one skip in March, but you can find the recordings on our YouTube channel if you search Malheur or Malheur Friends. Welcome. Malheur National Wildlife Refuge is a really special place in Eastern Oregon, and I'd be remiss if I didn't start out by saying that it does exist on the ancestral homeland of the Modoc tribe of Northern Paiute, known today as the Burns Paiute. So it is about 187,000 acres of diverse habitat that is in the northern stretch of the Great Basin, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the work that's happening on the landscape today through the summer technician program. Our organization, the Friends of Malheur National Wildlife Refuge, exists with the mission to promote the conservation and appreciation of Malheur National Wildlife Refuge through outreach and education, advocacy, and stewardship. This manifests in a diversity of ways. We're really proud of the work that we do on the ground and in our community. And there are a lot of ways that you can be involved and support this work. What we like to think of this as being together for Malheur. Our organization is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we are member and donor supported. We currently have over 1,200 annual dues paying members that support our programs. And that does include some crossover with over 1,400 annual donors that give grants from donor advised funds that are contributing monthly through our monthly donation program, or maybe make an end of year donation as part of their annual giving plan. So we want to thank those people for helping to fund all of our work, but in part for funding our seasonal biological technician program, which you're going to hear about today. Emilee is our 2024 biological technician that the Friends of Malheur are funding to support the refuge's needs on the landscape. So we're going to hear all about Emilee's exciting summer at Malheur. And with that, I'm going to just turn it over to her, let her introduce herself to you, and I will be back again at the end of the program. I am moderating this program from the chat room on my computer, so please feel free to pop your questions or comments into the chat box throughout, and then we'll get to those questions at the end. So thank you so much for being here, and enjoy.
All right. Hello, everyone. I just have to get this switched over to my presentation, hopefully really quick. All right. Hello, everyone. As Janelle introduced me, my name is Emilee Gooch, and I am this summer's Friends of Malheur Wildlife Biology Technician. I've been here since about mid-May, and I have about 2.5 more weeks here left at Malheur. So a quick introduction for anyone who may or may not know me. I know I had a bio come out kind of back in May, but just a quick introduction. So my name is Emilee, and I came here all the way from Michigan. I'm from Marquette, which is that little star up in the Upper Peninsula. It is an absolutely gorgeous place that not many people know about. So if you get the chance to visit, I highly, highly recommend it. I go to school in Marquette at Northern Michigan University, and I have 1 more year left of undergraduate, so in August I'll be heading back for that. And then in May, I'll be graduating with a double Bachelor of Science with majors in Environmental Science and Fisheries and Wildlife Management. Then I have concentrations in Natural Resources and Wildlife. I had to feature in the middle of that picture there, that is my dog Ringo, who I cannot wait to get home and see. And then that other picture is just me with the fish. I felt it was fitting for the presentation, but that's me. What really drew me to this position was just the chance to get to experience a whole new environment, a whole new ecosystem than anything I've ever been exposed to in Michigan, and it has really done that. I've seen so many new species and habitats and environments, and it's just been a wonderful opportunity this summer. So what have I been up to this summer? I'd say about majority of the work I've been doing, at least half, has been a lot of aquatic work. As you know, you can see on the map there, Malheur Lake makes up a huge part of the refuge. It's a very important aquatic ecosystem for a lot of the waterfowl, the shorebirds that we have. And then there's the Blitzen River and tons of just irrigation and canals running throughout the refuge. So aquatic management is a huge part of what the refuge does. A big part of that for me has been helping to monitor the fish populations moving throughout the water systems this summer. So for anyone who may not know, there are 4 fish traps located throughout the Malheur River system. So we have the Sod House trap, which is up near headquarters, the Boozy and Grain Camp traps, which you kind of find in the middle section of the refuge in Buena Vista. And then we have our Page Springs trap down at the south end. So these 4 traps, you kind of see the fish moving up through them sequentially from Sod House all the way down to Page Springs and P Ranch. So a little bit about how those traps work, because this was all new to me when I came. So at each of these traps, you can see those pictures are not at Malheur. Obviously, they are somewhat of a similar design. It was the best I could find. But so at each of the traps, we have the dams in the water where the fish stop the fish from being able to go up the river. And then we have the fish ladders, which mimic kind of that upstream movement that help the fish to move upstream, where they'll head into the traps so that we can monitor the populations before sending them upstream. So how my weeks have largely started, mostly throughout June and July. Monday mornings would start with going out to set these traps. So we'd set each of the 4 traps, which just entails getting the traps in the water, opening up the fish ladder so the fish are able to move up. And especially on Mondays, after the fish ladder's been kind of closed all weekends, there's usually be a lot of fish waiting to move up in the system. So we'd have a lot moving up then. So that picture on the left there, that is the Boozy fish trap. So we use those chains to manually raise and lower the trap out of the water. So gotten some good strength training in this summer, because the traps are pretty heavy for me when they come out of the water and they're full. So we've had to work to get those out. Once they're out of the water, we can empty them, monitor the fish populations. And every trap is different. So like the Boozy and the Grain Camp ones, those have the chains, and then the Sod House, the Page Springs traps are much easier to get out of the water. You have a nice button you press and those raise them up. But it's been really cool getting to learn kind of the different systems that these traps work with and learning how to use those, because it wasn't something that I had any experience with coming into this. And I feel much more knowledgeable now leaving, looking at kind of the fish and aquatic management side of things. And then the picture on the right, I just had to include, I feel I've been told I got lucky this year with the mosquitoes, and I'd agree they haven't been too bad this year, but at the start of the season, we did have a little bit where you were getting pretty swarmed with mosquitoes. So on the right there, that was at the Boozy fish trap, and pretty much the minute you stepped out of the truck, you'd be pretty swarmed, and that was in the span of like a minute. So, but overall, I'd say I got pretty lucky with mosquitoes. They're not too bad this year. So yeah, Monday morning, go out, set traps, and then usually for the next day or two, then again, you'd go out in the mornings, and this is where we'd get the traps out of the water and then empty them to monitor what fish have been moving upstream through the system. So the picture on the left, that's at the Sod House trap, where we have the water coming out of the trap, and then the fish can be netted out of the container there. And again, every trap was a little different, and so learning the differences between them was cool, and what techniques work best for getting the fish out. And we'd net the fish out. We kept data on what species were found in the trap, how many of each. We'd keep note of that, and then they'd be released to go continue their journey upstream to the next trap. The red band trout was the species that was of higher concern. That is the native subspecies of rainbow trout that is found at the refuge. So that picture in the middle is with one of the red band trout that we had in the Sod House trap. And then on the right, you can see with each of the red band trout that would come through the traps, at any of the traps, we would measure them, get their length, and then we would also collect scale samples from some of them, and those will be used for DNA research and processing. Those are going to ODF and W for further work with those. Scale collection was another thing that I had never done before now. So fish handling and that kind of stuff was something that I've gained a ton of experience in and has been really cool to get to work with. And it's happy to report most of the red band trout that came through the system seemed to be large and healthy. We had red bands ranging all the way from about 14, 15 inches up to our largest was about 23 inches. So we had some big, healthy red bands moving through the system, which was good to see. And in the first majority of the summer, June and July, they were largely concentrated down at the Sod House trap. At the kind of that first stop moving upstream is where we were seeing majority of the trout. And then kind of in mid-July, all of a sudden they really showed up way upstream down at the Page Springs trap. So it was cool to see that they had kind of successfully moved upstream through the system. And then that picture at the bottom, we even started to see some of those young trout the last week. So it was cool to see that the trout were successful and doing very well within the system. And we had a lot of other species too within the traps. I think we had about 11 total. And coming into this, my fish knowledge was more limited for sure, being a wildlife concentration. There's only really one fisheries class I'm required to take. So one of the best things I've gotten to do this summer, I think, was just learn more about the fish species, especially the ones found out here, because they are so different from what I see in Michigan a lot of the time. So that was one of the biggest assets of this internship for me, was becoming much more knowledgeable of fisheries management and aquatic work than what I would get just from at my school. So these are some of the other species that we found. We'll just kind of run through them quick. So in the top left, that is everyone's favorite fish here at the refuge, the common carp. And then below that, we had a ton of those little red side shiners show up in all the traps. And then below that, the bridge-lip sucker is also very abundant. The top middle, we had a couple of tui chub show up, a couple of long-nosed dace, the one below that. And then the next one is the northern pike minnow. And then in the top right, the brown bullhead, and below that, the mountain whitefish, which did very well at Page Springs this year. So I really appreciated getting a lot of hands-on fisheries work this summer. It was really nice to be able to do that. And that was working largely with Dominic. He's the aquatic health biologist here at the refuge, and he's been a phenomenal mentor and supervisor throughout this program. So he's been great to learn from through the fisheries management side of things. And then, so just 2 weeks ago, I was able to kind of write up the final report for what the fisheries system kind of looked like this summer. So that's just one graphic that I included. We had each one of those for each of the 4 traps. And then it was nice to write up the report and kind of compile all the data that I've been collecting this summer and get to see kind of what it all looked like. So just as a quick overview, the sod house and the Page Springs trap we ran from May 29th all the way through July 17th, and then the Boozy and Grand Camp traps from May 29th to June 27th. And those ones just dried up a little sooner, so we weren't able to run them. And then the same thing for Sod House and Page Springs. The water's just been pretty low lately in late summer that we haven't been able to run those traps as much. But in total this year, we were able to get 256 red band trout throughout all the different traps in the system and 257 carp. And any of the carp that came through, they all showed up in like a 1-week span in our traps and then just kind of disappeared. So not sure quite where they went, but any of those carp that did show up in the trap, since they are not great for the environment and the habitat, they were disposed of. And then same with the brown bullhead, which were the other invasive species that we had coming through. Those were disposed of and taken out of the system to hopefully give all the native vegetation and fish a better chance within the river system. We had 11 total species, the most abundant of those being those little red side shiners, which you can see in the chart. There was 286 of those just at the sod house trap this year, and then the mountain whitefish and the bridge lip suckers were both very abundant this year and did very well. So, and then you can see sod house was definitely our most successful trap just in terms of diversity of species and number of fish moving through. So that one was really cool to go to every day and see what would be in that trap, and that's usually where we saw majority of the red band trout again throughout most of the season until at the end when they all kind of showed up upstream at Page Springs. So that's it for fish work. And then some other aquatic work. We did some vegetation work just recently, about 2 weeks ago. I got to travel out onto Malheur Lake to participate in a vegetation survey with Dominic. And then that picture on the left, that is Josie. She's from the High Desert Partnership. She is phenomenal to work with if you ever get the chance to meet her. She's great. So we headed out onto Malheur Lake, and this was the first aquatic vegetation survey I've had the chance to be a part of out here. So that was a really cool experience learning about the survey techniques used and that kind of stuff. So, and just learning all the different species too, because that wasn't something I had a ton of experience in. So the picture in the middle, that's, you can see how high some of the cattail have gotten out in the water. And so some of the really abundant species, we saw a lot of the cattail and the bulrush, which is that top right picture. We had a variety of pondweeds, duckweeds. So the vegetation is doing pretty well in the lake, which is cool to see because as of just a few years ago, when the carp were really taking over the system, there was hardly any vegetation in Malheur Lake. So getting the vegetation back is really good and very important for the waterfowl and the shorebirds that use the lake. So it was cool to be out there and see how well it's really doing. And then again, just learning all those new kind of survey techniques. And anytime I have the chance to get to go out on the lake, it's just such a cool experience because it's not very often that people get to go out there because it is a pretty protected ecosystem. So that was really cool. And then the other aquatic work I've gotten to do kind of revolved more around kind of water quality sampling because it is pretty important here as well. So the picture on the left, it's this piece of technology that's pretty complicated and I kind of am just starting to get an understanding of, but it's the ADCP, the Acoustic Doppler Current Profiler, and that was acquired by the High Desert Partnership. And my fellow technician, Sarah, she's the maintenance technician at the refuge, and she's the one who really knows how to run this well. And I've been lucky enough to get to work with her a lot using the ADCP in a couple of the different points in the river system in the refuge. And so the ADCP measures the current moving through the river, and it gives a really good reading of turbidity and water quality kind of, which is pretty important. It looks at kind of the discharge into the river and how that might be affecting the current and the flow of the river, which for the refuge is pretty important with all the surrounding ranches and farms. We can see how the byproducts of those might be affecting the currents within the river. And I had never even heard of an ADCP till I came here. So getting to learn how to use that and work with Sarah has been really great. And seeing kind of how that then is used for management of knowing, are we taking too much water from the refuge or can we take more and how can that information be used? And then that picture on the right is using the flow meter. And this was kind of another part of my usual Monday once I'd go out and set the fish traps. And then once I'd already be down on the south end of the refuge is where we have the east and west canal, and we'd use the flow meter to track the flow of the river, and we could see the CFS, which is the cubic feet per second that the river was moving. And this gives a good idea of, do we need to change the irrigation levels? How well is the river running, the depth and everything like that. So that again was another piece of technology that I hadn't used before, but I feel pretty confident now using it, and it's a really good tool to have. All right, and then moving on from the aquatic work to the birds, which I know is what the large majority of people really are drawn to Malheur for. And I can admit, before I came here, I was not a birder. I haven't taken ornithology yet. That'll be this next year. But since arriving at Malheur, I have definitely gotten a crash course in birds and birding. And I mean, the biggest assets, one of them has just been speaking to all the visitors that come to the refuge, because they are all pretty knowledgeable about the birds, and they are very, very excited about it, which is great. So I've gotten to know my birds somewhat, at least better than before I came here. So one of my favorite experiences that I've gotten to have here was going out on the snowy plover survey, which was 2 days out in the playa and Stinking Lake on the north side of the refuge. And this was a part of the refuge that I hadn't been to yet besides this. And it was really, really cool getting to see that habitat, because I had never seen anything like that before, like the playa. And I got to work with some really great volunteers who were here, and then Teresa with Bird Alliance of Oregon, who is just so knowledgeable and a great person to learn from if you're trying to learn about birds. I don't know if there's anyone better. So the picture on the left is just out on the playa, and then in the middle, that was using a scope, which is actually my first time using a scope. So it was cool. And this was also my first wildlife survey I've gotten to do. So it was a really good chance to learn the techniques that kind of go into an avian survey specifically for like a single species. So that picture, the snowy plover, I did not take, of course, but that's what we were looking for when we were out there. And then that bottom on the right is Stinking Lake, where we spent the second day of the survey. It was quite a bit of walking. I think we did about 10 miles the first day and 5 miles the second. So got a very good tour of the refuge and the playa, and it was a really cool experience getting to join for that. And so the final numbers from that survey, I was told they were much higher than last year, so that was really cool to see. And these numbers are from Teresa, but out on the Harney Lake Playa, we found 131 adult plovers and 46 chicks. Out on Stinking Lake, there were 32 adults, and at Siloff Spring, we had 20 adults. So it was cool to see that they were being so successful when they were out on the playa. That was exciting to see. And another really cool part of that week was at the same time the tribal stewards were there that week. So they got to join us for a couple of things out on the refuge, including day one of the snowy plover survey. So the tribal stewards, they were there with the Lomakatsi Restoration, who does natural resource and conservation work in the area. And then it's youth from the local Burns Paiute that are here. So it's cool to get to know them and their culture a bit and get to work with them. So the top left picture, that's on our lunch break out on the playa. That's two of the tribal steward members, and then myself on the bottom right. And we got to do a couple of cultural activities with them as well, which was very interesting. We got to go out and collect tule, which is pretty sacred to their culture, and then learn how to make the tule duck decoys, which that's my attempt at one in the top right. Not perfect by any means, but I thought it was super, I keep saying cool, but it was a very cool thing to be a part of and get to know the tribal stewards that were here. And they also joined us. I got to take them to a couple of the fish traps and teach them about that kind of work. They joined Travis and I out in the wet meadows and got to see the invasive species work being done. And yeah, it was really great having them here. And then my personal favorite experience I've got to have this whole time, it was the coolest thing I've done, was I got to travel with Dominic to the Modoc National Wildlife Refuge, which is in Alturas, California, to do sandhill crane colt banding. And this was my first time banding any sort of bird, so that was just very cool in and of itself, and just getting to handle wildlife was super exciting, and I absolutely loved it. I had no idea what it would entail chasing down sandhill crane colts until I was there, and we were running across fields to chase down these colts, and they are fast, and it was hot, but it was still just so exciting, and I loved it. And you can see in the picture on the right, they're pretty good at camouflaging to their environment, which is why we had to run and get as close to them as we could before they dropped down, because once they dropped down in the grass, they were pretty hard to find because they camouflaged so well. But Yeah, we got to band, I believe it was 4 or 5 colts successfully, which was great because in past years, I know they haven't had a ton, so the sandhills there were pretty successful, and the picture in the middle is obviously that was with the first crane we banded, and, on the left, that's Marcia, she's the wildlife biologist at Modoc, and then a couple of their technicians there as well, and then in this coming week, I'll get to do a lot of duck banding, which I'm very excited for as well. I think it's gonna be a great experience, and yeah, this was just one of the, again, coolest things I've gotten to be a part of, and I absolutely loved getting to join Dominic for that trip and get to experience that. And then some other surveys I've gotten to be a part of. So on the left, that is a picture from just last week. That is at Boca Pond. It is one of the biggest impoundments on the refuge, and it's very important habitat for the waterfowl there. So that was just last week. I joined Alexa and Teresa for a waterfowl survey out at Boca, and that's actually where we'll be going to do the duck banding next week. And Boca, it was just gorgeous. We started at about 5 a.m. And again, Alexa and Teresa are just both such great people to learn from, both super knowledgeable when learning about the species, the habitat, and the ecology of the birds at the refuge. And just being able to work with them is always a great experience. And then on the right, those are all pictures from just yesterday, going out again with Teresa and Alexa and a couple volunteers to do a shorebird survey. So that is out on Malheur Lake. We saw probably couple thousands of birds, and it was, again, just trying to learn as many species as I can before I leave. And the picture on the bottom, I just had to include, that was after we went through a stand of bulrush and got pelted by it pretty thoroughly, and when we popped our heads back up after a couple minutes, we were covered in this bulrush and had to dispose of it. But yeah, learning the survey techniques, the kind of the different ones from the transects out on the lake to the point counts at Boca, the surveys on the playa. It's been really great getting to learn the different techniques that go into these wildlife surveys. And because it's the first time I've had the chance to do something like that, and it's been phenomenal. I've loved it. Few miscellaneous things that I've gotten to be a part of. So picture on the left, data entry, of course, a necessary part. Gotten a lot of bird data in, checked, duck banding data. I don't mind it too much personally. I know a lot of people really dislike data entry, but sometimes when it's hot out, I think it's nicer than being out in the field. So done a lot of data entry this summer. Picture in the middle is with a gopher snake. Travis taught me how to wrangle. That was sitting in the middle of the road outside the volunteer headquarters. So I love snakes, so I loved getting to handle one. I've only seen 3 rattlesnakes this year, all from a pretty good distance. There was one coiled up on one of the fish traps that we stayed away from, but I just, yeah, I thought it was cool getting to see the gopher snake up close and get to handle one. And then on the right, also with Travis, that was a day I got to spend going to a couple different locations, kind of far out in the wet meadows of the refuge. And this was with Travis and then a couple of botanists from the Wet Meadows Collaborative. And we were doing vegetation surveys, largely looking for some of the invasive species like meadow foxtail, seeing how they're doing in these areas compared to the native species. Unfortunately, a lot of the invasives are doing pretty well in those wet meadows, so working to make plans for that. And the cool thing with this one was just getting to learn a whole new vegetation survey technique. I had never used the technique that we used that day, so that was a really good skill to learn. And I really enjoyed getting to go out into the wet meadows, and kind of hard to tell in that picture on the right, but at some points we were in like cattail and grass that was even taller than us that we were slogging through in our waders all day. So again, just everyone I've worked with, from including those botanists, Travis, they're all so knowledgeable, and it's been really great getting to work with so many different biologists and people within the field. And another one of my favorite parts is environmental education. It's something I've always loved. Back home, I had spent about a year this past school year doing environmental education at our local children's museum. And yeah, it's one of my favorite parts because I think it's such an important part of conservation is educating the youth and getting them excited about nature and the outdoors. So like we had a couple of different field trips come to the refuge at the start of the summer, some first and third graders from Burns, and I really loved getting to work with them. We taught about the importance of refuges and how they help migrating birds, the importance of refuges, especially within like the flyway. We taught about food webs and relationships between species, and I really loved getting to work with the kids that came there. And then I also got to join Alexa and Dominic and Teresa at the Harney County Library for a day for their summer reading science program, where we had a bunch of kids from the community there that day as well. And I had the chance to lead the station on pollinators and teach about local pollinators, the importance of them, look for bugs with kids, dig in some dirt, which was a lot of fun. And then recently, the refuge also just got the Kids in Park track trail that we got to be at the ribbon cutting for, which is a really great chance for kids to come to the refuge and hopefully get excited about the things they can learn and be a part of in nature. And I really enjoyed getting to be a part of environmental education. And again, I just think it's so important, and I love getting to work with kids in the local community. And then finally with the Friends. So one of my favorite things and what really drew me to this position was the chance to not just do the field work and the science, but also get to do the community stewardship and the outreach and talk to people in the community and the public and work events with the Friends group. So we had the Migrate Through Malheur event at the start of June, which just encouraged people to come to the refuge, explore different parts of it. I got to be stationed down on the south end at P Ranch and stamp booklets of people who came through. We had a picnic at the end for everyone to go to, and that was a really fun event. We had Puddles, the mascot, there dressed up. And then another really cool event was the In a Landscape, which was a totally new event to me. I'd never even heard of anything like it, but it's a concert series where the musician, whose name I'm not remembering now, travels to refuges and parks and performs in them. You can put on your headphones and explore nature and listen to this concert. And that was, yeah, a very unique event that I had never heard of anything like that. And that was the most people I've ever seen at the refuge at a time, and it was really great to get to be a part of that and meet the people who came there. And then lastly, this year I've been working in the visitor center in the store on Fridays, and again, just getting to meet the people and the visitors that come to the refuge is great, and getting to talk to them about what they've seen, what they're excited about here, and again, learn from them about the birds here because they know more than I do a lot of the times. And I've really enjoyed getting to know the people and work in the store. So that's been one of my favorite things outside of just the science and the field work, is getting to do the outreach as well. And yeah, that about covers it. If anyone has any questions or comments, thank you for having me. It's been a wonderful summer. I couldn't really have asked for a better internship. I don't think. I've loved every second of it.
So I'm gonna moderate. I hope everyone can just hear me from where I'm standing. We don't have any questions coming in yet, but we would welcome them. That was such an intense download of just a jam-packed summer experience. We do have a comment from Dominic, who's been one of Emilee's direct supervisors, just that she's done a fantastic job. Thank you for sharing with this group. And I have to echo that. Thank you, Dominic, for being here to support Emilee in sharing this presentation. So yeah, if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask, please type them in the chat. It's actually a really small group this evening, so if you want to unmute and ask your question orally, that would also be fine today. So I do see a contingent from Michigan and just unmuted. So please, Emilee's family, say hello. We're very, very glad that you've shared her with us for the last couple of months. So thank you. Do you have any questions or comments to make?
Hello.
Hello.
Grandpa has a question on his 88th birthday today.
Yeah, happy birthday, Grandpa.
He's a lifetime U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service employee, retired employee. Yep. Go ahead.
Emilee, I wanted to find out why you're eradicating bullheads.
Oh, the bullheads, they're an invasive species here as well. So along with the carp, they can cause some issues for the native species and hurt the vegetation in our native. So they're just one of the two invasives that we would get rid of. And we only had about, I think it was 25 of them. So we didn't have too many. So they're not really taking over. But yeah, them along with the carp are the ones we get rid of, because they're invasive in this system, at least.
Yeah, great answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good job. Thanks.
Follow up?
Nope.
Awesome. Well, if you have not been following, Cerise says, Emilee, thank you so much for sharing your experience. what are you planning for the future? And has your time here changed or made you think differently about that?
Yeah, actually, so my plan right now is after I graduate to go straight into grad school is the plan. I wasn't sure exactly where. I had a couple schools on the top of my list, but then actually at the start of this summer, I visited Corvallis and I got to tour Oregon State and I absolutely loved it. And I know they have a very good wildlife science program. So actually now that's kind of Oregon State has jumped to the top of my list. So that's definitely changed because it wasn't a school that I had thought about too much. And then, yeah, I loved it and I loved Corvallis. So that's my plan for now. Hopefully pursue wildlife science for grad school. And then after that, unsure yet if I want to do more federal, nonprofit. I'm not totally sure yet, but that's another good thing this summer, having the chance to work with both a nonprofit and a federal agency has been really cool to see kind of the two sides of that and the different career options available.
All right, thank you so much for the question. Yeah, I think that that's a really, really great to know that these experiences really can impact someone's track and your way of thinking about things, and it's wonderful. Yeah. In part, that shift and that opportunity to see Corvallis happen because of the FOMR newsletter. I would encourage anyone who does not currently receive the Friends of Malheur newsletter to go to our website, malheurfriends.org, and sign up for that. You can also go to our website and find the blog and search intern or technician, or even just Emilee's name, and you will find her contribution. She's written articles, starting with a biography when she first arrived, and then articles about her experience every month that she's been contributing to the newsletter. So that is also available for you online. Okay, any other questions before we wrap up? I have just a couple of closing comments that I want to make, unless anyone has any additional questions.
Yeah, thank you again for having me. It's been wonderful. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emilee.
Sure.
All right, I'm gonna come back over here and we'll go back to, oh no, where did mine go?
Oh, your presentation?
Yeah,
It's on the next tab next to,
oh, up here.
yeah, intro.
Oh, this one.
Yeah.
Zoom likes to put the toolbar right over the tabs, so you can't, there it goes. Click on them. Oh. Not my computer. Just here. Okay. Okay. I'm back. All right, so I just want to plug the fact that this is ongoing for the rest of the year. So we have next month is September. Jess Wennick, who's the restoration coordinator for the refuge, he's going to be coming on and talking about the renaming and reframing of the lake. And so there's some big news to be heard there, and we'd love for you all to join us for that. And then in October, we're going to hear from wildlife biologist Alexa Martinez, who's going to talk about bats. She loves bats. Bats are really prominent on the refuge. If you ever come to Malheur this time of year, you can smell the truth in that statement. So we're really excited to have Alexa come on and talk about the various bat research that's been conducted on the refuge, what we know about the species, diversity, and abundance at Malheur Refuge. So please join us for that one. November is yet to be determined, so stay tuned. Keep your eye on the newsletter for that announcement. Okay, so as I mentioned at the top, this speaker series is in part a celebration of the Friends of Malheur National Wildlife Refuge turning 25 this year. We're really excited about honoring this quarter century of conservation stewardship at the refuge. You can learn more on our website, malheurfriends.org. You can get in touch with me anytime, friends@malheurfriends.org. And you can find us on Facebook and Instagram. And we hope to hear from you again soon. All right, and with that, have a great night. Any additional comments before we go? Nope. All right. Thank you so much. And thank you, Emilee, for being here and sharing that experience with us. Appreciate it.